In the history of war, battlefield conditions have dictated the evolution of military technologies around the world. From sophisticated underwater warfare to surviving sub-zero temperatures, the forces of nature have always been a soldier's toughest challenge. Protecting the protectors from extreme combat environments has now become integral to every army's war plans. Equipping Indian soldiers with the most advanced battlefield survival technologies is the Defence Research and Development Organization, DRDO, India's foremost military research institution. India gained independence in 1947 and has since grappled with border tensions and disputes that have often resulted in devastating war. To protect the nation's territories, India raised a large army and equipped them with advanced training facilities. However, one fierce adversary remained unchallenged: India's extreme war terrain. With an extensive border marked with gigantic mountains, hot arid deserts, marshlands, dense forests, and a long coastline, India's varied landscape constitutes some of the toughest battlefields in the world. Over the years, these unforgiving combat zones have challenged the rigor and determination of Indian soldiers.
Protecting the soldier in the Indian environment, which is very, very harsh, is a challenge. You have to provide protection against heat, you have to protection against very, very cold conditions, you have to provide protection against marshy lands, and also many times when you are operating underwater.
The operational need of the Indian Army has forced it to deploy soldiers at altitudes of 9,000 to 20,000 feet. The Ladakh Valley, situated in the heart of the northern Himalayas, is one of the most important strategic base camps for the armed forces. But the terrain is fiercely inhospitable, a unique combination of thin air, low in oxygen, freezing temperatures, and high mountains. It's also a battlefield that has regularly tested the Indian soldier's ability to survive in extreme war conditions.
A soldier from Kerala who may not have seen a temperature below 20 degrees plus Celsius, and you are making him to work at minus 50 degrees Celsius. So how do you get him acclimatized to those environmental conditions?
The high-altitude war environment can play havoc with soldiers and military equipment deployed in the region. The reduced oxygen and sub-zero temperatures have a wide range of physiological effects and cause illnesses to the troops stationed in these areas. The hostile atmosphere significantly diminishes a soldier's ability to carry out military operations optimally.
Human physiology is such that any person living in lowlands, when he comes into high altitude, his body undergoes multiple changes. The body takes time to adapt to the low oxygen content, which we call hypoxia, to the low atmospheric pressure, which we call hyperbaria, and consequent to which, the first 24-48 hours, a person is exposed to a condition called acute mountain sickness.
By the early 1960s, the Indian Armed Forces had engaged in two brutal wars in the region. Troops were being deployed in quick succession, but the unpredictable climatic conditions of the area caused many casualties. The army had to rapidly juggle its contingents as high-altitude illnesses took a serious toll on the soldiers' health. To diminish the impact of acute mountain sickness, DRDO designed a special acclimatization schedule for the Indian Armed Forces.
So we have a three staging of acclimatization. first staging between 9 to 11,000 feet, he spends certain number of days. Then he goes to 13 to 15,000 feet and he spends a certain number of days there. And then he goes above that altitude and then for third staging. So when you take him in a staged manner and when you keep him also in routines which will not affect his health and make him exercise at those high altitude area, then you are tuning his physiological systems to a higher elevation. So this is how gradually you get your physiological system acclimatized to those high altitude conditions.
The acclimatization schedule attunes a soldier's body to adjust to the atmospheric pressure in high altitude locations. This reduces the chance of the troops developing acute mountain sickness as the oxygen flow in their bodies is stabilized according to the environment.
We have various safeguards, checks and health issues which we try to ensure that we periodically check them as they acclimatize and they are prepared for higher altitudes.
But the demands of war require swift action and high levels of physical endurance. During any conflict, troops have to be deployed rapidly and for long durations. To expedite the physiological acclimatization of the soldiers and enhance their endurance, DRDO introduced yoga, the ancient Indian discipline of physical and mental well-being.
We have looked at prophylactic, promotive and curative potentials of yoga. So we have looked at it in a very scientific way through a well-controlled experiments based on which now yoga has been introduced into the armed forces. We have demonstrated how yoga helps a soldier at high mountains.
As a part of the acclimatization process and to create favorable lodging units for the soldiers, special thermal shelters were built in the region. During the initial stages, soldiers are housed in these shelters for effective adaptation of the environment. These shelters were equipped with integrated temperature regulators, biodigesters and air monitoring systems.
The shelter needs to protect a person from environmental vagaries. In high altitude, it is the cold, which is very important. So the shelter which we develop gives that right kind of insulation so that the soldiers are protected from extreme cold.
By the early 2000s, the Indian Armed Forces had penetrated deeper into the heart of the Himalayas. Apart from the extreme physiological challenges, the army was up against another deadly force of nature: avalanche. Avalanches blocked the military's expansion plans in the region and caused casualties on a regular basis.
For the troops deployed in these regions, foremost is that they should not get caught in an avalanche, so we don't have any casualty or loss of life in this region. So for their movement, it's very important that we predict avalanches. We have to tell them that general area, so and so area is likely to get affected by an avalanche, so that they can plan their movement.
For efficient prediction of avalanches, the Snow and Avalanche Study Establishment developed various technologies such as avalanche control structures, remote mapping technologies, and avalanche detection sensors. These unique inventions warn the troops and civilians about an impending avalanche and have greatly reduced casualties caused due to this natural phenomena.
We have set up a set of sensors across the Himalayas. The purpose of these sensors is to predict the avalanche which takes place.
Over the past few decades, DRDO has spared no effort to support high-altitude military initiatives. The organization has shielded the Indian Armed Forces from the unseen attacks of nature and has created technologies that have helped the Army to overcome the hardships of challenging war terrain. Since independence, the mountainous Himalayan battlefields have been the most challenging opponent of Indian military planners and developers. The Indian Army has engaged in 4 brutal wars in this trans-Himalayan range, and each battle required heavy deployment in one of the toughest combat zones in the world. The extreme climatic conditions of the region have been a major cause of casualties for the armed forces, and there was an urgent need to create technologies to save Indian troops from the wrath of nature.
The first mission of DRDO was to understand the intricacies of fighting a war at high altitude, both from human point of view as well as the weapon system, even including an aircraft to land, a helicopter to land, or to airdrop of food. It's a big challenge at high altitude.
The harsh natural condition of India's war zones severely impact a soldier's ability to perform with rigor and agility. Hostile conditions and the lack of fresh food supplies pose a major threat in this harsh battle terrain. Erratic weather has often delayed the supply of essential commodities and equipment in the area. And since this cold, arid desert remains snow-capped for most of the year, crop cultivation is also minimal.
I had been to many high-altitude regions, and the commandant of the forces, they told me that if you are here with a green chili in one hand, 1,000 rupees in another hand, and if you call a soldier and tell him to make a choice, he will definitely go for a chili. That shows the importance of the fresh vegetables, the importance of the fresh food to the soldiers who are bordering our borders.
In the 1960s, troop deployment in high altitudes increased significantly. This, in turn, increased the demand for essential food supplies in the region. Since local produce was very low, the armed forces had to bring in food for the troops at extremely high costs. This greatly impacted defense budgets. The army needed a sustainable and cost-effective solution to a fundamental problem. To cater to the armed forces' need for fresh food, the Field Research Lab, or FRL, was set up in Leh. This was later renamed the Defence Institute of High Altitude Research, or DIHAR.
The laboratory was established after the Chinese aggression in 1962 by the vision of the then Prime Minister Pandit Nehru. And the basic idea was that to provide the fresh vegetables and fresh food materials for our armed forces as well as the civil population here.
Cultivating fresh food in Leh was no easy task. The environmental conditions in the region posed a big challenge to any scientific research. The entire valley is covered in snow for nearly 8 months every year. The sub-zero temperatures not only impacted local food production, but also created scarcity across the entire region.
Imagine on an average of 12,000 feet above the sea level, where in winter temperature falls down to minus 25, 30, growing crops. Would it be easy? I don't think so.
By the end of the century, the Army's supplies bill was running into billions of dollars. Food and other essential provisions were being airlifted from the plains every day. To meet the increasing demand, there was a need to grow crops in the region throughout the year. After extensive research, DRDO scientists found a way to use the region's unique natural conditions to boost local production. The lab developed technologies that used the harsh conditions of the area to their benefit. As the valley covered itself under a blanket of snow, the sun, quite literally, provided a ray of hope. With an abundance of solar energy and more than 300 days of sunshine at their disposal, the DRDO lab built special greenhouses that made crop cultivation a year-long activity.
Their greenhouse has been a great success. Our units are able to have in their own areas and grow some of their own vegetables. And that spin-offs are taking place to the civil also. If certain greenhouse technology comes into the army camp, automatically the civilians also see it and it gets transferred to them.
These greenhouses make optimum use of excessive sunlight available in the region. After successful in-house tests and trials, these technologies are transferred to the troops and locals. But these greenhouses only cater to the army's demand for fresh vegetables, while meat products were still being imported from the plains. The climatic conditions of the region created major roadblocks in fulfilling this demand locally, as sub-zero temperatures hampered animal husbandry. As a solution to this shortage, technologies were developed to create a favorable environment for meat and egg production in the area.
We have also developed a lot of expertise in terms of the animal technologies. So we have been able to provide the support to the services in terms of the animal products like meat, poultry farming, dairy products. All these things we have been able to help soldiers by way of our technologies.
The Ladakhi Kisan Jawan Vigyan Mela is an annual event held at Daihar, where the lab transfers new technologies to local farmers and the army. The festivities create a link between the armed forces and the local population and gives them an opportunity to adopt new technologies.
Ladakh Kisan Jawan Vigyan Mela. It has done a lot to popularize the cultivation of vegetables, whereby farmers from all over Ladakh, they come and participate in this Mela. They see it for themselves. They interact with the experts and scientists. Similarly, the army also participates in it.
This fair is symbolic of DRDO's efforts in a region which is of great strategic importance to India. It is here that the army, farmers and scientists unite to work towards creating a favorable ecosystem for the people stationed in such high altitudes. In today's war scenario, demands of modern-day combat expose military personnel to a variety of hazardous conditions. Troops around the world have to be prepared for every war terrain. To carry out these demanding assignments, soldiers need to be equipped with advanced protective gear for safe operations.
See, in military scenario, our combat soldiers have to carry out very tough missions during which they are exposed to hostile conditions. Think of a situation where a helicopter pilot has to land on Himalayan ranges for a specific mission, and he's suddenly exposed to very, very low temperature, and he cannot be wearing heavy clothing, and with heavy clothing and heavy gloves, he will not be in a position to operate the controls.
To support the Indian soldiers, DRDO developed various protective suits and systems, such as the combat freefall suit for paratrooping missions and the submarine escape suit for underwater operations. These special suits cater to the unique requirements of the troops during different high-risk assignments. The combat freefall suit equips the paratrooper with protective systems that assist him during combat missions. Fitted with a steerable parachute, personal bailout oxygen system, communication and navigation devices, along with other subsystems, the suit ensures the soldier's safety during free-fall operations.
Suddenly, we may need to carry out a combat mission across the enemy line, and we need to drop large number of combat soldiers across the enemy line for a particular mission. How it is done? Generally, for such operations, the combat paratroopers are dropped from a height of 30,000 feet so that they have a long reach to glide across and then get across the enemy line to carry out the combat mission.
Developed by the Defense Bioengineering and Electromedical Lab under DRDO, the combat freefall suit ensures safety of the paratrooper at every level. Extensive tests were done at the lab to make the gear suitable for every combat condition.
Yeah, it is perfect.
The laboratory has also developed a special submarine escape suit for underwater escape scenarios. This suit can withstand high pressure inflicted on the soldiers during deep-sea escape missions.
If there is an accident of a submarine at depth of 100 meters, then the crew have to escape. They have to leave the submarine and then come out safely to the surface. You can't come like a bullet out. Then you will develop decompression sickness.
The typical pressures that exist in the water, it is 10 times the atmospheric pressure what we are all experiencing. At those pressures, if he simply comes out of the submarine, his eyes, ears, they all will get punctured. In fact, his lungs also will collapse.
The submarine escape suit is a self-contained closed-circuit breathing apparatus that maintains the partial pressure of oxygen underwater. The protective hydro suit is made from neoprene rubber coated on nylon fabric, which provides high stability during extreme pressure conditions.
Submarine escape suit developed by DRDO can help a crew escape from a depth of 100 meters. Now in the next 5-year plan, we are going to enhance it to 120 meters and 150 meters. Then we will look at 180 meters. So gradually this capability will be augmented.
For over 5 decades, DRDO scientists have developed an array of technologies to support Indian soldiers in various combat conditions. From protective clothing to cultivation of food in cold deserts, the organization has developed some top-ranking technologies to protect the protectors.